I'm Max Clark. This is 20 Minutes Max, and I'm going to rant a little bit about cybersecurity and the psychology of buying cybersecurity. This is something that I've been trying to figure out for years now. An interesting animal to deal with. First off, I've been helping companies with cybersecurity for over 25 years now. 25 years ago, it was relatively easy. We were talking about a basic firewall, antivirus. You were dealing with, mostly issues related to, macros in Office files that would just wreak complete and total havoc, things that would take over your email. It was pretty straightforward stuff. Today, the threat vectors are just incredible. First off, everything 25 years ago, we were helping companies get on the internet. I mean, dial-up modem kind of getting on the internet. Today, everything is connected. Everything's connected 24/7. Everything has, exposure. Everything is critical. Just used to call it the perimeter. The perimeter has become so expansive that the techniques required to actually deal with this have changed significantly as well. If you meet anybody and they tell you they're running antivirus software, for instance, you know that their cybersecurity program is in the dark ages. That's just pain waiting to happen. Okay, a question I've asked cybersecurity practitioners, and these are people with all the fancy acronyms, the CISOs, the CISSPs, people working for MSSPs, people working for MDR and MTDR companies, professional organizations, professional cybersecurity practitioners. The question I've asked is, how do you sell cybersecurity inside an organization when they're not actively buying it? And what I mean by this is if you're in an IT department and you know that you need a stronger cybersecurity posture, how do you sell that to an executive team or to a board that isn't actively telling you to go out and purchase something? And what do you do? And the answer really is you can't. Usually the counter and the reaction to this is you have to educate and you have to educate and you have to educate and you have to give them statistics and you know what? It doesn't really matter. It's not providing an endless stream of statistics of what percentage of companies are going to have breached and what the breach statistics are and what the average cost for a breach is, and all these different things make absolutely no bearing on the psychology for people. This is one of those, it's not going to happen to me. We have, what do you hear? Oh, it's not going to happen to us. It hasn't happened to us yet. We don't have anything important. It's not really important that we deal with this. It's one of the best and worst things about, the human condition and people. We have this overwhelming optimism that, horrible things aren't going to happen to us. We're not going to have a heart attack. We're not going to get into a car accident. Our house isn't going to be broken into. Go down that list, right? And even providing somebody with statistics around, this is the likelihood of you getting into a car accident doesn't necessarily elicit behavior. I mean, that you can't scare somebody into wearing a car seat. You can enforce behaviors that get changed because if you're not wearing a car seat, you're going to get a ticket. And then over a period of time, people just adopt car seats, or you push a campaign down to kids, wear a car seat, wear your car seat, wear your car seat, and it becomes automated. And then you have an improvement. And so I've kind of wondered about these things with the relation to cybersecurity for some time. And one of the first problems that we really deal with when you start talking about budgeting and acquisitions around anything in the cybersecurity realm is there's no measurable ROI that comes with cybersecurity, right? So return on investment, there's no measurable ROI. There's no, you can get into like total cost of ownership. Like, what does it actually cost you to deploy the system? But in terms of like, if I spend $100,000 on fill in the blank cybersecurity tool, it's going to make me this much money, or it's going to save me that much money. There isn't that correlation between the two. And this is part of the problem with cybersecurity and budgeting and acquisition is just that there's no direct correlation with it. So usually what we find when we're helping clients go through this and deal with this is how do we repurpose existing budget, or how do we solve other pain points and at the same time, roll out and improve a cybersecurity posture. So, what's a good example of that? Usually it's related around hardware, right? We've got firewalls deployed. We're having a problem managing our firewalls. Okay, great. Let's change the manufacturer. Let's change the infrastructure. Let's bring in a professional services company that can do this. Let's augment your staff with a 24/7 team and a SOC. These things all, and today, normally I'm not going to sing Gartner's praises, but this push towards SASE is wonderful because it creates this thing where, by nature of having devices now connecting you to the internet, you get security posture as a result as well. So it used to be that you'd have this firewall that anybody buying on-premise firewalls thinking that they're going to turn on UTM or DPI or these different things. It's just a waste of, you're not getting anything out of it, right? But actually getting real next generation firewall capability or cloud-based filtering or malicious inspection or these sorts of things are all really good for you. Now, I'm going to try to come back here and not get way too off tangent. I say that there's no ROI in cybersecurity, aka there's no way for you to tell a CFO if you spend $100,000 you're going to save $1 million, or if you spend $100,000 you're going to make $1 million. You can't tell your CRO that. What you are talking about with cyber is it's not a direct correlation, and it's not like a linear is not the correct word, but it's not like a 1-for-1 ratio, right? It's not something where you're spending $1 to try to protect $1, you're spending $1 to protect $10. It's an asymmetric ratio on protection. I mean, you're talking about extinction level events for a company. And what do I mean by that? A breach can put you out of business. I'm going to let that hang there for a second. A breach can put you out of business. What is the ROI on that for a cybersecurity posture? We're not, again, this isn't like spend $100,000, save $1 million. It's spend $100,000 and don't go out of business. And there's different scenarios for these things. We can talk about data loss. If you're dealing, what's good examples? If you're dealing with motion picture, pre-release content, and you have pre-release content and that gets breached. This isn't a scenario where you're going to necessarily be sued out of existence. You're just not going to have any customers anymore. People aren't going to do business with you. So those kind of scenarios of data residency and what kind of data you have upstream, it is not worth it in a B2B relationship for a client of yours, for your customer, for your client to do business with you if it's risky to them. If it's too risky for them to do business with you because it's been demonstrated or they just don't feel safe, they're just not going to do business with you. Your revenue is going to go to zero. It's gone, right? So extinction level events. Other examples of these things, we hear about all these ransomware attacks. You see things like Colonial Pipeline, or you see hospital systems, and they're completely locked out of their computing infrastructure. They have no ability to do anything on their computers. So now we'll use extreme examples again, right? So if you're a hospital and all of a sudden your computer, you've completely gone into an EMR and you're completely digitized and you're completely dependent on that thing, and now all of a sudden none of your computers work. How do you do patient care? How do you do intake? How do you do tests? How do you record, orders from a physician? How do you maintain prescriptions? And literally everything, right? Like the whole entire, your critical care infrastructure related to somebody's heart beating, like those kind of things in beds. That entire thing is now electronic and on computers. And if your computers don't work, what do you do? Well, the answer for a lot of these hospitals that have had this event take place to them is they have to transfer their patients out of the hospital to other hospitals in the area. It's terrifying to actually see this stuff, the public perception as much as possible. But if you've taken and you start talking about, turn on the news and see ambulances transferring patients out of an ICU on ventilators because the hospital is shut down, massive critical issue. Colonial Pipeline, ransomware attack, could not move oil and fuel along the pipeline on the eastern seaboard of the United States. And you see video and footage of people at gas stations like pumping gas into like kiddie pools in the back of their trucks because there's no gas anywhere, right? That's where I say these things are asymmetric. Now, Colonial Pipeline ended up spending $50 million in ransomware to try to get this. And the other thing that's been going on for a while now is this idea of, we've got insurance and insurance is going to take care of it. Listen, that's just not what happened. That's not reality anymore. First off, insurance companies are moving away from paying out on cybersecurity incidents. And, one of the first shots across the bow was this idea of like any nation state sponsored hacking is going to be excluded from policy. Well, what's nation state sponsored hacking and who defines that? Well, if the insurance carrier is defining that, you're SOL, right? Because now everything is going to be nation state sponsored hacking. You get a ransomware attack and a breach and your entire system's offline, and you're going to call up your insurance company and be like, okay, we need $10 million from you in order to wire this money. That's not going to happen. They're going to activate your incident response plan. Hopefully you have one, right? Which is basically like, hopefully it's more than just like run around in circles screaming in panic, right? But how many days can your business, can your company be off? Completely shut down, completely off. How many days do you have? 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days? 2 weeks? At what point does your business cease to exist because your customers are making other decisions because they're forced to, because their business is now at risk? This is a really curious thing for me with cybersecurity is we're not talking about, spend $1 to protect 10 or spend $1 to protect 100 or spend $1 to protect 1,000. We're talking about spend $1 to protect all of the dollars, everything, because the scenarios are so scary on the outside of it that, you're just dealing with something completely different for your business. Now, the second part of this that we get into is like, oh, I'm not a target. You were 100% a target. You might not be like, some other country is trying to hack in to steal your intellectual property target, but you have two things that people want. You have money and you have resources. And here's what I mean by that. You have money in bank accounts, which means that that's valuable. You don't have to be a bank to have money in a bank account, right? So if you have money in bank accounts, you are now a target because if somebody gains access to that money, that's what they want. You have resources that people want, common resources that people can make money off of, right? If your phone system is vulnerable and gets hacked and people can send phone calls through it, they can sell that phone call to other people. And you come back into, and you find out 30 days later that you've got a several $100,000 bill because somebody was running call traffic to Nigeria through you or, other African states or Eastern European or whatever it actually is. And by the way, again, this is not fantasy. This has happened and this is in case law because people have then sued their phone company trying to say they don't need to pay it. And guess who lost? Them. Because it was their phone system. They sent the calls to the phone company. The phone company delivered the calls. The phone company's not obligated to block calls from you for any reason whatsoever. There's a good example. Locking you out. Okay. Hacking into your computers to run cryptocurrency mining. Okay. That happens. Hacking into your website, to put stuff on your website to then, launch attacks to other people. That happens. Hacking into your email then to try to go hack other people. That happens. Locking you out of your computers. Classic ransomware, right? What's the resource? Well, they don't necessarily want the resource. They want to prevent you from having access to the resource, and then you'll pay them to get access back to your resource, right? Like your company can't function without its computers. Pay the ransom or don't work, right? So now we talk about it. We can talk about it, and we can get into these things in terms of like levels and like what levels are appropriate for you in terms of like protecting yourself and being reasonable. So if you take outside of you're actually a bank and people are actively trying to hack you every moment of every day because there's lots and lots of money there, or if you're some sort of we can argue whether or not you're chemical manufacturing or you have SCADA control systems or something that if somebody gets into, we're talking about, massive like terrorism level event. But if you're just like, let's just say you're just a normal business, you're just, you're a professional services company, you're just a normal business. You don't need to go to nation state level protection. You need to go to reasonable protection. You need to block 99.9% of the noise that's just on the internet because you're connected to the internet. A second you plug yourself into the internet, now you are being attacked. You're being attacked every day. The second you have an email address, you're being attacked. You're being attacked every day. So take appropriate measured steps to protect yourself from what is occurring. Don't learn this lesson because it happens to you. We have locks on our doors in our houses because we don't want to be victims of easy crime. You lock your car when you park at a mall because you don't want to be a victim of easy crime. So the same thing is true for a cybersecurity infrastructure and what you need to have. You need to have identity access management. You need to have single sign-on. You need to have multi-factor authentication. By the way, those things are really good for you also because it makes your IT team's life easier and it also makes your users' lives easier. It is easier for your users to not have to remember passwords to log into 57,000 different websites. The average company is dealing with 110 different SaaS platforms today. So not having to have your users remember passwords to 110 different websites or provision them or deprovision them is good for you, right? So you have to have that. By the way, having an MDM or UEM is good for you. It makes it easier for you guys to roll out software. It makes it easier for your IT team to manage your computing assets, to roll out laptops, to update software, all these different things. It's a good thing. Now you get extra benefits out of it. By having an MDM and UEM, you can leverage that into a cybersecurity plan. You should have an EDR, endpoint detection and response. We talked about beforehand, like antivirus is terrible. If you're running antivirus, just assume you have nothing. Going to a real EDR platform, and it really, we don't even have to argue which one, right? It doesn't matter. Just pick one and run it. Run an EDR. You want an EDR. The EDR is going to help you prevent things from happening. It's going to help you detect when something's happened and respond to it and remediate it faster. You want an EDR. Now, from the EDR standpoint and going from here, we can get into a lot of arguments and conversations about what you do next and what's appropriate and what's not. We can talk about whether or not a SIEM is appropriate for you or not, and talk about whether an MDR service or an MTDR service is good for you or not. We can talk about web filtering, whether it's a secure web gateway, what you're doing for remote access, like with ZTNA. All these things are good for you, but think about it from you need to come to the table with table stakes. You need to come with identity access management, single sign-on, multi-factor authentication. You should have an MDM or UEM, and you absolutely have to have an EDR. And from that point, my belief is you should have something that can do web filtering for you, that can do malicious URL inspection and blocking, that can do and give you functions around CASB, DLP, and ZTNA. And again, we're not talking about spending millions of dollars. In a lot of cases, we're talking about, even at the very high end, you're into this for less than $10 a month per user. So this isn't like, compared to what you're spending on your CRM licensing, this is a drop in the bucket. And what it will save you, and this isn't about keeping you from being a headline. In order to be a headline, you have to be a big company. If you're, it has to be big enough at this point that it affects enough people, or people already know your name, that you're going to be a headline. You're not going to be a headline. Chances are you're not one of these big names. You're just going to disappear in the middle of the night with a whimper, and nobody's going to know. Cybersecurity is not about ROI. It's not about capturing ROI. It's not about spending $1 to save $10 or spending $1 to save $100 or make $10. It is about dealing with the fact that a breach will end your business, and what you're really protecting is from an extinction event. I'm Max Clark. That was 20 minutes.